Cool, everyone. Glad to see you on yet another reflection session. And today I have a handful of topics to discuss, so maybe this will be a long episode, at least longer than usual. And I want to begin with the description of the emotional roller coaster that I've experienced this week. To provide a little bit of context, I think of myself as of a very emotionally inconsistent person because during some periods of time I can feel really good and ready for challenges, and for others periods of time I simply cannot find energy to get off my bed. This week was of the latter type, so for the majority of it I was feeling really sad. It seemed like a total disconnectedness from self, from others, and from like the meaning of life, from the purpose. I was questioning the things I did, and in short, it didn't felt resolved at all. My productivity expectedly plunged, so I found myself working at weekends to like compensate the hours I haven't. I wasn't able to productively work basically. But happily, somewhere around Thursday, I decided to watch an actual psychiatrist on the YouTube, and I found a gem that I was not anticipated to find. Um, the game is actually an emotional intelligence, and not that I didn't know the concept before. I definitely underestimated its importance for a meaningful life. And I think I was able to comprehend it this time because of the psyche model I developed earlier, which was discussed, I guess, 2 weeks previous. Mm. And the main idea behind the emotional intelligence and emotions overall is that, according to my model, they're fundamental protocol of our brains, of communication in our brain. Um, Emotions are literally the language that our subconscious uses to communicate its evaluations of the environment. So, if you aren't able to understand this language, you're basically blind. And what I'm going to do with this knowledge I received through this week of so called suffering, I should say that I will try to integrate some emotions comprehending routines in my schedule. I still don't know how exactly it will look like. Among the variants I'm considering are meditations and drawing, actually. But because drawing is hard to do, I think at first I'm going to meditate. Um, Now let's move to another interesting concept that I found, and it is based on the article in Psychology Today, and it was actually about the two types of coping mechanisms. These types are called dopamine coping and serotonin coping, and their main difference is the underlying neurotransmitter. And as the names imply, the first type utilizes dopamine, and second uses serotonin or serotonin. I don't know how to pronounce this thing correctly. Dopamine coping turned out to be an easy way of doing things, and it is useful when you don't have time to deal with the actual problem, but you still need to function somehow. And this coping includes all the social media, cigarettes, alcohol, gaming, and what surprised me the most, rationalization. This latter coping actually was pretty surprising because I didn't even consider rationalization as a coping at the first place. I was basically thinking of it as you processing your own thoughts in order to understand the causalities and consequences, which uh, consequences of your actions and the things that led to this new stage that you need to cope with. But after I read it from the article, rationalization quickly became almost natural in this new role. The mechanism behind it, I suppose, works through shifting your attention from experiencing negative emotions to reasoning about them. And because our brain can effectively hold 3 to 4 objects in the active state, this whole thing works. On the other hand, serotonin coping is about long lasting mechanisms that give you an ability to not only cope but actually tackle the problem directly. Serotonin coping includes all the good stuff like sports, socializing, meditating, sleep, and diet. And these solutions are they don't work instantly, but as a trade off, their effects last much longer and are much more powerful than their dopamine analogs, I should say. The main conclusion I made from this dichotomy is that you should really think about the balance of dopamine and serotonin activities in your coping strategy. I've already embraced the fact that you basically cannot live without the cope, because we as a species aren't evolving as fast as as evolves our culture. So yeah, in order to function properly, millions must basically cope. And finally, I want to talk about my master's studies, because there was actually good news from Vienna. I received my acceptance letter for the master's in computer science, and I hope I will be able to enroll there. I'm happy about it for three reasons. Firstly, studying in Austria is much more affordable than studying in Germany. Germany costs twice as much, so I cannot study and live there without the substantial financial support. And secondly, the research in Vienna is also really interesting. In my motivation letter, I had to find the research groups that I'd like to join, and I found three that captured my attention. These are knowledge management, bioinformatics, and software architecture. Finally, I'm really interested in computer science, and especially in its fundamentals like algorithms and underlying math. Now that I cannot learn these topics by myself with the open materials provided in the internet, but the structure and guidance of the university are really helpful. If there won't be any surprises, my study will start on the 1st of March, so I have to do all the bureaucracy in the upcoming couple of months. As I have nothing more to say about the ideas, I want to briefly mention a couple of interesting events that happened during this week. First, I deleted my Linux PC once again. I know it sounds clownish, and that really is, but I simply had no other choice. NixOS was really nice until I needed to do my work. And this last statement led me to a thought that I won't be able basically to fully switch to Linux until there is a problem which that switch would address. Until then, I will distro hop almost endlessly. Second, I returned back to the simplest way of tracking my useful time, which I was doing during the second year of bachelor's degree. I installed an app called Forest, created 3 tags there, and that's basically it, nothing fancy. I consider this simplification significant because I was struggling for almost a year now with more complex time tracking systems. So by this decision, I effectively abandoned my unnecessary attempts of overcomplicating things that should be simple. And again, all the complexities I made in the previous iterations of the system don't solve any problem at all. So yeah, I returned to the most primitive configuration, and that's it. And finally, I decided to switch my Obsidian approach once again. I closed file 3 and removed any folders, and now it's called the search first Obsidian approach. The approach is in the interacting with the files primarily through the search box, which consequently means stumbling upon many nodes that I've written in the past. I use Ctrl-O shortcut for the search and node creating, and Ctrl-M allows me to assign URL for newly created nodes by simply moving it around the world. And that's basically it. Now, that's all I have for today's session. Thanks for listening. I wish you a great and productive week, and boo-boo.